fourth Sunday of a 5-Sunday series about proving abundance, living the abundant life, A through Z. We are in part 4. We're going to start with, what are we starting with? J, left off. We're into J today. Also, all of the talks so far are on YouTube. We have a YouTube. If you go to YouTube and say Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, we have a channel. You can catch up, which I encourage you to do, because everything's building on everything else. And the theme, proving abundance, is important. It's sort of like you need to prove love. There's so many cosmic ideas out there. You know, universal love. How many of you have ever wanted some? It's like, how many of you have ever felt lonely, disenfranchised, rejected, and by yourself? A little universal love would have been good, right? See, there's ideas out there, and they kind of like platitudes that float along. But they do us no good if they're not proven to ourself and to our own soul. You know, there's ideas that love heals, but it doesn't matter if you don't let love heal you. There's ideas about forgiveness and how strong that is and how powerful it is, but it doesn't matter if you don't apply it. And so the same thing with abundance. Abundance is a universal constant. It's a universal constant. There's plenty of stars. There's plenty of sand. How many of you have noticed there's plenty of leaves? If you're raking, you've noticed, it's like, wow. I sometimes think that oak tree outside our house is actually multiplying leaves overnight so it can just shed some more. And have you also noticed that the world has plenty of problems? It has an abundance of problems. I hope that you don't, but most likely in this room there's an abundance of problems because who has one? Great. So that's a bunch of you. There's an abundance of problems in the room. There's also an abundance of solutions. There's an abundance of divine ideas that can enhance life. And those ideas are waiting to be caught, to be embodied, to be used and utilized. There's an abundance. That's the nature of life. And we are called to prove that to ourselves, because the universe has an abundance of ways that it can care, maintain, sustain, and prosper us. There's an abundance of ways that we can thrive no matter what we're going through right now. That's the idea. But you got to prove it. You got to apply this stuff. So I want to introduce to you someone who has proven some of these things. She, I wanted to listen to her talk because I wasn't really sure which letter to fit her into. But I've decided proving. Emma is proving it over and over and over again, Emma Marino. The miracle is she's really a devil, but today she's an angel.
Thank you. My name is Emma Moreno. I'm a woman of power, living a prosperous life. Easy to say now, but it took me a while and lots of practice to say this statement with complete confidence. You see, when I first moved to Seattle in 1994, I arrived with no credit cards, money in savings, and a monthly income that came from a rental property that I own, completely paid for, in one of the nicest neighborhoods in Mexico City. Life was good then. But after a few years of living in the United States and learning the American way of life, my debts grew so fast. I had maxed out, because at that time I already had credit cards, so I had maxed out all my credit cards. I had student debt, and my future didn't look good at all. And even though I had a good job and I had a small business that provided me with an extra income, I was not able to keep up with paying my debts. And one day, as I was desperately trying to make my checks and paying for my debts and crying because I didn't have money, I realized that my beliefs about money were keeping me small and were a barrier for me. And that's when I first came to CSL. So I heard about the classes, and I immediately signed up for financial freedom. And I learned the laws of prosperity. I learned that money is energy. I learned that money is good and does good in the world. And I started to apply all the principles. And my earnings went up. I expanded my business. And I started buying rental income properties in Seattle. And I even bought myself a beautiful home, a new home. And I was basically living la vida loca. It's fun, fun, fun. My life was going up and up and up until the old stinking thinking habits started to creep up. And I started to ask myself, who do you think you are? What are you doing? And suddenly, I was again full of debt. I worked like crazy to do my payments. My business was going down, and I lost one of my properties in a really bad deal. I had so many expenses that I started to have panic attacks. I felt ashamed. And I didn't want people to find out that I was not really successful. I was really a fraud. So I had to take a breather. I had to reset. And I went back to CSL and started taking classes again and started applying the principles that I learned before. And in 2014, I set up my intention to double my income with half of the effort. And now, that intention has become a reality. I have doubled my income. I have lots of time to spend with my son. I work less days of the week. I have time to travel. I have time to study. I have time to do volunteer work nationally and internationally. And I see now how my money and myself is a force for good in the world. I donate money to local community organizations. I have established a scholarship for LGBTQ kids in the city. And I love and adore Center for Spiritual Living, so I support financially my spiritual home. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for all of you. All of you, for the staff of CSL, for all the spiritual teachers and guides in Center for Spiritual Living, because you guys have supported me through my journey all these years. And by taking responsibility of my life and keeping a consistent spiritual practice, I have learned that in life, there's always ups and downs. There's always difficult situations, like a recent divorce. But I don't have to go up and down with my emotions. I'm learning to ride the waves and to invite new energies to create abundance in my life. And so let go of that stinking thinking. Connect to new ideas, sign up for a class, do service, ask for a prayer. I'm Emma Moreno. I'm a woman of power living a prosperous life. Thank you.
And because of Emma Moreno, we have now, she has translated 2 of my books into Spanish, and we are getting Emma Curtis Hopkins into the Spanish-speaking world. So thank you very much. It works. So we were doing A through Z, and A is the most important word or letter in this A through Z series, and it stands for? Absolute. Yay. My friend Robert Russell, who wrote the book, Putting the Prosperity Ideas to Work, because that's really what you have to do. You can't just hear it. You can't skim it. You really need to put it to work. You need to prove things to yourself. Anyway, he wrote, the most direct approach to prosperity is through the absolute. Now, let me explain once again. I'm doing this every single time because I think we need to remember, we need to practice going into that place within ourselves where we touch the absolute and the absolute touches us. The absolute could be that thing that is beyond all names. It's not God or Allah or Jesus or Buddha or the field of all possibilities. It's that which is beyond all of that caused all of that. And when we touch that place and that place touches us, I mean by consciousness, because we can't be separate from it, but when we're conscious of it, and we let that consciousnness seep into our conscious awareness, there is no consciousness of lack, limitation, or deprivation. It's just not there. Now, it does have, how many of you have ever had a thought of lack, limitation, or deprivation? It's not that it doesn't happen to us as a personality, but it's not happening when we are being influenced by the absolute. The highest form of practice is to live from that awareness, and that takes practice. In fact, it's not even living from that awareness. When we start to live from that awareness, we start to be lived by that awareness. See, I've noticed now that, and I've been talking about this for so long, but I think I'm going to write a book again, another one. There's a bunch that aren't being written. There's ways of doing spirituality. A lot of spirituality is do the practice, think this way, and finally, eventually, you get to pure consciousness. Or you could court pure consciousness, and you notice that your actions and thoughts all get taken care of. That's living from the absolute. That's the direct approach. But let's prove it. Once again, it's a nice idea. How would we prove that? So I invite you to play along with me. It worked first service, and you're just as good as they are. So I'd like you to prove how the absolute can affect you, how it can shift you and your awareness. So how many of you have a financial concern? I mean, like a concern. See, it could be I've got so much money I don't know where to put it. That's still a concern. So, geez, what am I going to do with all that money? Oh, me. Oh, which financial advisor do I go with? Okay, so who has a financial concern? Thank you. Just participate. This is called participation. Otherwise, I'm just talking at you. I want you to participate because that's the only way to prove anything. I think it was Emerson who said, don't have a secondhand God. And don't have a secondhand experience of God, even though I am incredibly influential. It's my gift. Can I just tell you something? Just an aside, we will get to proving it in a moment. Remind me if I forget. Anyway, I had the funniest experience last night. I'm talking to Tim, and he said, we really need to keep our voices down. And I said, but honey, I'm using my indoor voice. And he says, I know you were gifted with a voice that projects, but could you not use it all the time? What? I don't need this microphone. And if I could sing, I could be an opera star and probably carry it off. But here, let's go. So this is it. I want you to think of your concern. Think of it. Put it in your mind. This only works if you have it in your mind. Now, I'm asking you to look down 45 degrees. So those of you in the pews can't reach the floor. I don't want you doing this. That's crazy. I want you to go 45 degrees. So you're probably looking at the bottom of the pew in front of you. Unless you are in the front row, you're looking just at the bottom of the pew in front of you, 45 degrees. You've lowered your eyes 45 degrees. Now, notice how that concern is. Notice how you think about that concern. Watch your body. Pay attention to your body really quickly. How are you breathing? Is there tension? What's going on with you? And what's happening to the concern? Now take a deep breath and look straight out. That means you'll be looking at someone's head most likely, or in between two people. If you feel eyes burrowing into the back of your head, it's not true. They're just looking straight ahead. So look straight ahead and now think of the concern. Same concern. Now watch your body. Pay attention to your body. Pay attention to the thoughts that swirl around the concern. How are you breathing? Okay, now look up, 45 degrees. Don't look at the ceiling, that's not 45. You'll probably be looking somewhere in there. Take a deep breath, just look up, 45 degrees. Now what happened to the concern? What's happening to your body? How's your breathing? How many of you noticed that the concern shifted when you shifted your eyesight? How many of you noticed that there's a shift when you shifted eyesight? How many of you noticed that when you were here, there were possibilities, and when you're here, how many of they, when you looked up, the concern just sort of dissipated, like, who cares? Yeah. Isn't that interesting? About 60% of you raised your hand. You know, if that was a drug, we'd make a lot of money. Because most drugs aren't 60% effective. Now, this is why it's important and why it's not just a trick. If we go from, we're going to go from J to S, but let's just leap into L right now. L is for the law. The law is the law of cause and effect. And the law of cause and effect says, and well, if in the Bible, the law of cause and effect was that it's done unto you as you believe. And as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Thinketh in his heart means the thought plus the feeling. The thought plus the internal experience creates our reality. So when we have an internal experience of this is no big deal, do you see that that is a consciousness that would create it not being a big deal? If we have a consciousness of, wow, that's not so much, do you see that that would make it not so much? Consciousness is cause. As we continue to look up, we're being affected by that presence, that absolute, and we start to think the way the absolute, we're actually not thinking the way the absolute thinks. We're moving into the realm where there's no lack, no loss, no deprivation. There's no disease. There is no problem. If all of us thought from that place, problems would be replaced with solutions. That's the law. Where you look forms your thinking. That's mysticism. Now, there's a book on that called High Mysticism. I'm giving you the Reader's Digest footnotes, which is basically where you look inspires your thought. To look up will inspire high thoughts. High thoughts will create solutions. Let's go to J. We'll skip L. Let's go back to J. J is about just return. And just return is about circulation, about taking it in and giving it out, and that what you give out should come back to you multiplied, pressed down, and running over. That's a just return. But to get there, we have to think from here. And when we think from here, we realize that it was true what was written in the Bible, which is that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Everything was created by and belongs to the absolute. It's God, the infinite intelligence. It's the cause of all creation. It wasn't created. Spirit or the absolute or whatever you want to call it, because it's beyond names, didn't create creation and then leave and say, I'll see you in a couple of million years, see how you're doing. Hope you do well. It's not out there somewhere. It's still here. And we prove that on the October 10th talk. So go back to the YouTube channel, CSL Seattle. And there was a practice where I wanted you to prove that with a flip of a thought, you can experience the absolute. It's always here, it's always working, it's always available. So, if it did not relinquish creation to humanity and say, hope you do well, what it did do is it made us stewards or caretakers of this creation. We are caretakers of it. We don't own it. We're caretakers of it. And to experience just return, we have to understand that we need to be in the flow, and that flow is called the spirit of generosity. So there's 4 thoughts to that spirit of generosity. The first one is called non-possessiveness. How many of you know people that are possessive? A couple of, yeah. Only 5 of you. All money and all creation belongs to God. And we can come in with, and what we came into this incarnation with was only the experience we'd learned in prior incarnations. The only thing we're going to leave with is the learning that we get from this incarnation. We didn't come in with anything. We're not going to leave with anything. We're just here to enjoy what is ours to enjoy at the moment. We're just here to enjoy it, to take care of it, and then we don't have to become possessive. To become possessive means this is it, and as soon as this is it, we're going to lose it. Because do you see what this, does this look spiritual? I realize I think I'm waking up to this, and I'm actually being healed from the inside out, because I have this thing. I can lose stuff. I've lost money. I've lost my purse. I've lost my credit cards. I never want to lose my passport again. Now that's a bummer. But I lose stuff all the time. But I had these glasses, drinking glasses. I bought them about 22 years ago at one of the Bellevue art fairs, and they were handmade, and they had red in them, and I loved them, and they were thick. And I bought 8, and maybe 6. I bought 6, and I'm down to 1. And so I went to another place that makes handmade glasses, and because I like it. Every time I feel them, there's like art in your hand, and it's like ooh. And so I bought 5 more glasses so I could have a set of 6 that will look different, so it looks like they're on purpose. And I was drinking out of one of them last night, and I thought, somebody's going to drop one of these, and it's going to be gone. And the thought is, so what? And I thought, whoa, so what? Every one of those other glasses, I went, oh, another one breaks the door. It's like, oh, God. It was so wonderful to not feel attached. It's a glass. I'm eternal. Stuff's going to be transient. Everything that is of matter is transient. I'm not. So why be possessive? After you can start to let that ruminate and become real for you, because see, when we're looking up, this glass doesn't matter. Then we start to think of ourselves as steward and distributors of God's gifts. I'm a steward of these glasses. I hope you enjoy these glasses if you come to my house. This stuff, I own nothing. Really, in the big scheme of things, let's get back to what ancient people knew. Let's get back to Native American traditions. We own nothing. It all belongs to God. Think how the earth would be different if people didn't think they owned the land. I mean, I pay taxes on it, a lot. But if I think of this as God's land and it's ours to take care of, do you see how it's different than, it's mine, I can do with it what I want? And that gets us into doing things that don't serve everyone else. And then the third one is, all things belong to God, and all of our expressions, and all our expressions of God, and we give in cheerfulness to lift the earth and our fellow human beings, which means that we give not because people are disadvantaged, but we give because we're supposed to give. It's fun to give. How many of you would like to be seen as disadvantaged? I don't see any hands. No one else does either. And we create what we're giving to. Why don't we just give? Because you know what? I've got some extra. I've got some extra. I give out of my surplus. You're there. I've got it. Do you see that's a different frame of mind that will create a different future for all of us? The fourth thing is, in sharing, we give of ourselves and we are letting life force flow. This is a good one. This is like life force flow. In sharing, we give of ourselves and we are letting the life force flow freely through us. Whoa. You know, I wrote it down. It looks good. I had no idea how I would sound. So let's just take a reality check, how we might experience that life flow, how we might experience feeling like everything's God's and we are giving a portion of that back to God. So all of you received, if I tithed today, I would be giving, and you give a little amount here. You do not have to sign it. Please don't sign it. I want this to be totally anonymous. If you were tithing, if you gave 10% of what you had, because it doesn't belong to you anyway, to the place where you're spiritually fed so that you continue to be spiritually fed and others are spiritually fed, and you don't give it to us because we need it, but because you have it. If it was a free flow and it was healthy, how much would you give today? Just fill that out. Just fill that out. I don't see any pins writing. I know it's like, oh, I love deer in headlights. You know, First Service just was doing this really quickly. If you need a pin, just raise your hand if you need one of these. We will not check your fingerprints. There's no way of us knowing anything. And I will tell you why I'm doing this when I get to M. And now, great, so now the ushers are also going to come by and pick those up from you. They're just going to take this. All you have to do is write a little simple number. It's really simple. Easy, easy, easy. Great, here we go. And great, thank you so much. We love it. This side's doing their job. Great, wonderful, wonderful. Now I'm going to continue on while they're doing that. So when the basket comes by, just put a number in, just put something in, and I'm going to go on to kingdom. The kingdom of God is the realm of power, and what Jesus said is, seek ye first that kingdom, and all else shall be added unto you. So part of it with J is that we're constantly seeing that we don't own anything, and we're sharing and giving back to God what we don't own anyway. I was a Mormon for a while, and I really did buy into the fact that everything I have is a gift. And I get to keep 90% of it. Sounded good to me. Everything's a gift. Life is a gift. But the kingdom, the realm of power is seek ye first the kingdom, and that was the hard part for me, because a lot of times when I'm distressed, when I'm afraid, when I need relief, I know that myself and others, what we do is we seek a fix rather than kingdom. I want this to get better. rather than the kingdom. I'm glad that Emma shared, because what I know about Emma's journey is that she finally got to the place where I will seek God and I don't want just the fix. And all else was added. I mean, like, she could tell about the miracles that when she finally started trusting God, everything, it was like Job. You know, everything was given back to her, multiplied, pressed down, and running over. That's what the kingdom does, but we need to seek it. We need to say, I want God more than I want this or that or this or that. So last week I ended my talk, and the talk was about imagination, and I told you that I came to the place where I told God I wanted to be rich. How many of you remember that story? And in a few weeks I met a man, and we were rich. Remember I said that? And I said, I'll tell you the rest of the story. Now it's time for the rest of the story. Kingdom. Seek ye first the kingdom. It was fun. It was fun on weekends to say, not should we go to Leavenworth or La Conner, but goodness, let's see, should we go to San Francisco or New Orleans or back to Orlando? And it was fun to have money be no object. For a girl from Springfield, Oregon, I was living that whatever life you were talking about, La Boca Loca, something like that. It was really a good life. It was a good life. And I absolutely loved that man, and that man loved me. Seemed like no problem, right? And I also had a really good job with a phone company that helped me pay for ministerial school and all the clothes I wanted. And I didn't get $6 cover-ups from Egypt. I was buying different kinds of clothes. And then I got my first church in Salt Lake City, and he thought that was a great idea because he loved to ski. So he could leave his work anytime because he owned it. And he was skiing. He was skiing in all of the wonderful ski resorts outside of Salt Lake City and having a great time. And he got tired of skiing, and he said, well, let's now go someplace else. In fact, actually, do you really want to be a minister anymore? Let's have a family. And I didn't want to. That church was my family. I didn't want to give it up. I didn't want to hop from place to place with the next great place to live. I liked that. So he wanted to settle down and have a family, and I wanted to nurture people to be all they could be. So we got a divorce. I stayed fairly conscious. The church didn't pay much. And I stayed conscious because Murphy had still been supporting me while I was in Salt Lake City, and he wasn't going to support me anymore. And even though I could, I'm sure, have gotten at least back in, 32 years ago, $1 million would have gone a long ways. I could have gotten, I don't know how many millions of dollars in our settlement because we both lived in community property states. I took $15,000 so I could put a down payment on a house. That's all I wanted. It seemed right, and then all of a sudden I remember this wave of, oh my God, what have I done? There goes my goose. And then a voice came, and it's only spoken about 6 to 7 times in my life. All of them changed my life completely. And what it said is, the consciousness that you have enjoyed stays with you. You're not divorcing it. You will always be rich. But rich just meant that if I needed it, I could have it. Rich just meant if I put my intention on it, there would be a way for that to demonstrate. Doesn't mean, for me anyway, bank accounts. It means freedom. And I made that decision. I felt prosperous. I felt rich. And that $15,000 has gone a long ways in 35 years. So, what can I say? I was seeking the kingdom, and all else is given. Too many of us seek that or this or them, and they're never the kingdom. We've already talked about law, the law of cause and effect. When I could see myself as being cared for, I had to be cared for, which also is M for mental equivalence. How good can you stand it? I did not want my lifestyle to be diminished, and it hasn't. Even though it comes in different ways and in different channels, I have a good lifestyle because that was my mental equivalent. The reason I asked you to fill those little slips out, and some of you did and some of you didn't, it doesn't matter. I know how to do math and algebra. I want us as a church community have a higher mental equivalent. And it'll be easier if I do the math and say, this is what's possible. And as I hold that, we as a church will rise up to that. So thank you for helping me build my mental equivalent, our mental equivalent. That's M for mental equivalent. I'd say more about that because it's actually the essence of everything, but if you take Beyond Limits, you'll learn a whole lot about it. N is for negative thinking, and how many of you know that you have it sometimes? Yeah. But back in that place where we look up, there is no lack, no loss, and no deprivation. When we look up, limited thinking evaporates. And so the first key to doing that is to continue to look up. Now, you can read this book by Emma Curtis Hopkins, High Mysticism, which is all about looking up, or you can just take my word for it. How many of you have ever read High Mysticism? Yeah, it's easier to just take my word for it, isn't it, Jess? And then obedience. Obedience is when you know a thing, do the thing. And just like electricity never fails. Now, the current may fail, the access to electricity may fail, but electricity doesn't fail. There's never going to be a place on the earth where there isn't electricity. Even if there were no generators, there's still the principle of electricity exists. If you don't have electricity in this building or in your home, don't say electricity is failing. You look to see where it is blocked, where the current is being disconnected. And that's obedience to the law, to just assume that prosperity, abundance is happening. And if I'm not experiencing it, things flowing to me, if I'm not open to things flowing to me, where have I blocked it? Some of it might be a negative thinking. Some of it might be, I'll give when I get. Or some of it might be getting, I'll make it work. When I get this all together, I'm going to seek God. All of those thoughts will create a block to what wants to happen. It'll create a block to that happening because abundance wants to happen. Another block to abundance, with obedience, when we look at all these things, is complaining. How many of you know that once in a while in your mind a complaint, kind of just goes through? Not big, just tiny. Nothing serious. We all have them, but we need to reframe that, because if we entertain complaints, I've never been addicted to drugs, but I have a feeling. In fact, actually, drugs just, except for psilocybin mushrooms. Oh, that was a good day. Anyway, yeah, you're not in your grandma's church anymore, are you? I I've never been addicted to drugs, but I wonder sometimes if drugs are kind of like complaining or getting angry. You know how sometimes there's like this buzz? Like I think sometimes when I experience complaining, it's like, ooh, it feels good. Ooh, I'm so smart. Ooh, I know better. Ooh, if they just listen to me. God, I could run the world. You know, that little complaint that's just so righteous. But just like a drug, it makes you ugly. It tears down your life system. Like a drug, you are less of a person when you entertain complaining and it becomes habitual. We should have a 12-step program for that. Hi, I'm Kathianne, and I complain. Hi, Kathianne. And one day at a time, we give it up. But here's this switch I'd like to make. I want to say that perhaps complaining is a call to be in praise. When the complaint shows up, maybe it's a call to praise instead. And to give thanks for what we have, and to give thanks for the opportunities to know God in a greater way. Q is for questions, and I'm here to answer them. Nobody had questions. Nobody had questions after first service. And we have a workshop happening at 12:30. But from when I get done, or when we get done to the workshop, if you've got questions, come and ask me. I'll answer any of your questions. R is for resentment. That's another thing that will block your good. It's a great way to turn off the flow. Resentment of a person, a place, a thing happened in your life. Oh my goodness, they didn't pay for my college. Oh my goodness, I should have finished college. Oh my goodness, I didn't get that job. Somebody else got the raise. They got the promotion. Okay, great way to block your good. Stop it. S is for savings. Start it now. Start in small bits. Don't wait till you have more money. Money flows where your intention is. Have a savings account for travel, a savings account for good times, a savings account for personal development, a savings account for things that are going to happen, and just start putting money in it. I have a bunch of different savings accounts, and when something happens, I've already got the money saved. And it didn't start out with a lot. You start out with a small amount, it doesn't matter. I love it. Jeffrey Myers, I'll just use him because he would not mind me saying that I made that suggestion, and he's telling me about how all this money he's got in these different accounts just because he started. Just because he started, and he only started last summer. It's also salvation. S is for salvation, because that which is within you will save you. That's according to gospel according to Thomas. That which is within you will save you. And if you do not bring forth that which is within you, it will destroy you. If you're always running on your own personality, you're not going to accomplish as much. But that absolute connection, those high thoughts, they will save you from the lack, the loss, the deprivation, the doubt, the giving up. All of that stuff that plagues us can be dissolved. And then our consciousness is different. We're different. And if we're different, our life must be different. The everlasting, eternal flame of God consciousness can and will direct you in all of your ways. That's been promised. And you get to prove it to yourself. And the last S is for study. And I'll leave you there. When I was introduced to this type of thinking in my early 20s, I latched onto it. I wanted it. I wanted to know how to use it. I was a good student. So I encourage you to be a student. I encourage you to go to the bookstore. This is the woo-woo book. This is all about the absolute. These are 4 things you can do. So for doers, get this book. Woo-woos, get this book. If you're right and left brain, go both books. Study it. It's not something for the fall. It's something that you start to live, that you become good at, that you become an emanation of. Emma Curtis Hopkins said that we should be contagious with the living Spirit Almighty so that not only our life changes, but we create changes in everybody else. That people around us are more optimistic, they're more positive, and they believe in themselves again. That's what we could be doing. That's how we could be living. But first, we've got to be a student. So let's pray. How many of you had one idea hit you today? Like I threw out a bunch. Did anybody get landed with something? Good. Take that in. You don't have to take the whole thing in. This is going to be on YouTube. Watch it later. But think of the thing that you took in, and I want you to imagine you catching it. So I want you to raise up and be a mariner, a good one. I want you to raise up and I want you to catch that idea. And now I want you to bring it in and put it in your heart. Put it in your chest. Press it. Press it. Let your body become involved. Let the Spirit of God inform you. Form you in its image. Let a great idea become manifest in you. Embody the idea. So many times we have an idea and it's like slips off, and about the time we're halfway through brunch, we go, yeah, it was a good talk. She's kind of funny. I think she said something. No, I want you to press it in. And so I speak my word that which has been caught, that which has been intended to be embodied is embodied. And the work of the Holy Spirit is now working within each person in this room to make real a divine idea. We are here to make real the kingdom of God. We are here to make real all of the promises ever given. And this day, we incorporate into our life an idea that will change us, change our family, and create heaven on earth just a little bit more. One reveal at a time. Praise God, the work is done. And the work is not by ourselves, it's done by the presence of God that drew us here this morning. And will incorporate in us a bit of its absolute self. And so it is.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. In green pastures he makes me lie down. He restores my soul and leads me on for his name, for his great name. Surely goodness, surely mercy, right beside me all my days, and I will dwell in your house forever and bless your holy name. You prepare a table right before me in the presence of my enemies. Though the arrow flies and the terror of night is at my door, I trust you, Lord. Surely goodness, surely mercy, right beside me. All my days. rise.